Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, your garrulous gal with the gift of the gab, here to talk to you today about Venus in Gemini. Now, I've been speaking extensively in my recent videos about the character profile of Venus in Taurus and how she is this pastoral earth goddess who likes lounging in beautiful wildflower meadows, listening to songbirds, eating snacks, and being stroked and caressed by all of her lovers. And generally, she likes what she knows, and she knows what she likes. But once Venus tiptoes over into the buzzing, electrical, mercurial, flighty sign of Gemini, her temperament changes dramatically. Suddenly just lounging lackadaisically in one spot and having her senses slowly stimulated is no longer satisfying. She looks around from her picnic blanket and suddenly starts to feel a bit restless, a bit itchy. There's a nervous buzz going through her that is demanding to express itself. She's no longer interested in just being centered and rooted in one particularly comfortable or pleasant spot, but rather she feels this hunger to go out into the world and to investigate things, to engage with things, to interact with things, and to find out what they will say back to her, if indeed she gives them a chance to speak, which is not, I say, always a guarantee. So suddenly she leaps up from her picnic blanket and she goes, "Oh, what's that over there? Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, that's a very curious phenomenon over there. What do all these little patterns, what do all these little details and little nuggets of information and data mean?" I mean, I could sit still and I could think about them myself, but that wouldn't be very interesting. I know I'll go to the library, I'll get a book, I'll figure one out. Oh, I can pop to the bookstore over there. Oh, I can go to the cafe and I can meet a friend. Ah, there's an expert in the museum over there. He and I can have a chat about it all. I've got a hypothesis now about what all these different little intersecting experiences mean. Maybe I'll chat to this girl over here and she can offer me some kind of perspective, you know? And she can help my ideas keep moving. And that is the nature of Venus in Gemini, that whereas Venus in Taurus experiences pleasure in its body and through its senses, she experiences it through her mind, through her intellect, through her thought patterns, and through her ability to communicate. So Venus in Taurus says, if you love me, then touch me, stroke me, hug me, feed me, buy me gifts, make my life easier. That wouldn't fly with Venus in Gemini. She says, if you love me, talk to me, listen to me, interact with me, go on little trips and journeys and adventures with me, give me new ideas that I've never heard of before, give me novelty, give me stimulation, give me excitement, make my mind light up. So she might find the routine, habitual animal comforts of Taurus rather dull and stagnant and lacking that kind of wonderful interplay of life and communication that she needs. Her mind is always hungry, and whereas, you know, the body of Venus and Taurus might be very hungry, it still has its limits to how much it can eat, whereas the mind can seemingly go on forever. The more you give it, the more it keeps going. But this cerebral basis for love also means that for Venus in Gemini, relationships are much more idealistic, more intellectual, more based on the interplay of minds rather than the interplay of bodies. So there's a degree of impersonality there, unlike the more body-centered personality of Venus in Taurus. Venus in Taurus, being an earth sign, says if I like something, it has to make practical sense. It has to endure. It says, okay, I found someone I love. Well, you know, they make my life better, so the best thing I can do is just create a life where they're there all the time, and we live in the same house, and we have good jobs and enough money to keep us in the lifestyle to which we are accustomed, and we just kind of carry on from there and do all the things that a normal couple should do. Whereas, again, with Venus in Gemini, the relationship is isn't a physical experience to be tied down and tamed. It's an idea. It's a source of inspiration, and it has this kind of very frenetic rhythm. When I think about Gemini, I often think about the way you see butterflies, that they never seem to be flying in these solid, fixed, straight lines, but seem to be scattered kind of in this frenzied but beautiful way all over the place. They don't just have one overriding goal or romantic impetus which is keeping them aligned. Instead, they are scattered off in all directions, because freedom and the freedom to explore one's inherent curiosity is more important to Venus in Gemini than sustainability is. Because if Venus in Gemini says, all right, oh, this person's very interesting, they've got lots to talk about, they've given me lots of ideas, all right, I'll get in a relationship with them. But they may find very quickly that there isn't any lasting substance, that, oh, okay, I basically downloaded all the different ideas and interesting things that I can get from this person. I don't think I'm going to get much more from it now. I think I've basically rinsed that cerebral sponge dry. If I stick around in this, I'm just going to get bored, and where's all this energy going to go? Oh, there's another person over there. They look much more interesting. I'm sure they have plenty to say. So reducing things to this static habitual format will not fly with Venus and Gemini, who needs more spontaneity, who needs more looseness of structure. She might have a rough plan in place for the day, but if someone comes along and says, oh, hey, I know you're going to that party later, but we're actually going skiing in the Alps today, do you fancy coming along? And I say, oh yeah, sure, I'm free for that. That would be much more fun. So it's more flexible and interactive in terms of how it broaches the changes of life. Venus in Taurus often tries to create this enclosed pastoral meadow that keeps changes outside. Everything that is perfect and pleasurable and enjoyable is kept neatly grazing in this garden, and change is held back as an enemy, as a force that is always seen as unwelcome and destructive. But the nature of Venus and Gemini, ruled by Mercury, is change. It thrives off of change. It never wants things really to be the same twice. Even if it goes to the same restaurant or meets another friend or visits a town it's been to before, it still wants to have a new, fresh experience of that town. It still wants to meet up with a friend and for new ideas and novelties to be exchanged, for things to be just a little bit different. It doesn't need those big, massive, earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting changes that Sagittarius needs, where it wants to go to another country or an alien planet and have its entire values of ethics and morals questioned and expanded by its exposure to totally new ways of perceiving and being. It's just happy with lots of little different things, If we can think about Venus and Gemini traveling to go to work in the morning, it might want to go a different route each time and see little different parts of the local landscape and environment each time. And, maybe if it's walking one way, it might stop and meet someone it's never met to before, and they might have a casual interaction that just adds another spark, another jolt of electricity to an encounter that could otherwise be rather dull and mundane. It's that it values putting the energy in to keeping things interesting. And again, like I said, Venus in Taurus doesn't necessarily have that drive for things to be interesting. It values consistency over the unexpected. Whereas, Venus in Gemini can say, actually, there's little ways that life can be routine and have these repeated patterns, but also be shaken up as well, where the winds of change can come along and offer a little spark of refreshment that might not otherwise be there. She is the goddess who makes sure that the world does not get too stagnant, that it does not get too mired and settled in its ways, that it does not just submit to those forces of desuetude, but keeps those passions of newness coming, ruling the final segment of spring and those early experiences of summer. she's the one who says, no, there's more coming. There's more coming. Spring will not just remain frozen in this solid state. There is more coming. And I want to talk about it. I want to look at all these little changes and set up groups to talk about it. And then, yeah, let's just keep the conversation going. But because of this temperament and her system of values, I don't necessarily feel that a lot of the time, unless she has some pretty solid aspects to Saturn or some weightier planets, that Venus in Gemini has really the natural inclination for long-term relationships. It needs things that are much more loose and carefree, and because it is so attracted to novelty, to the excitement and the stimulation of experiencing something new for the first time, maintaining that freshness in a traditional long-term monogamous relationship is not always easy to do, and I think this is one of the reasons why when dating Venus and Gemini or strongly Geminian people can often be inclined to give people mixed signals and to give themselves mixed signals in turn, because they might go on a date with someone and in the long term this person might not be right for them at all. There may not even be that deep an attraction, at least on a physical level, but merely the experience of going out and meeting someone new is exciting for Venus and Gemini, and it might mistake that excitement and that thrill and that curiosity and that inquisitiveness of getting to know someone for the first time with genuine romantic feelings, and it can go, oh, that was a nice little trip that I did, that was something new, and it associates that newness with the person. But then it might find on repeated dates that actually this person isn't interesting at all. I'm deadly bored and I've only met them twice. What was I thinking the first time? And the person who was on the receiving end of Venus and Gemini's initial excitement and outpouring of affection wrought on by the spontaneity of the moment might be quite shocked when suddenly they go cold and disappear and don't speak to them for 2 months. But then, of course, Venus and Gemini, she goes back and forth. Like a lot of air signs, she struggles to make up her mind. And so she might lose interest with something initially and find she wants to go off chasing a bunch of other lovers. But then after a period, she might find, oh, well, actually, that person wasn't that bad. I do kind of miss that person. That was a bit of an interesting event. Maybe we can try again. So in some circles, I do think she might thrive best in situations of polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. But also, to really work with Venus and Gemini, I think she has to learn to go against her natural rhythm and slow down enough and think long enough to get in touch with what her feelings are. Because just as Aries can be misled by its initial impulses and said, yes, I feel this fire and this passion and this anger and this rage and this lust in the moment, this is the truest thing in the world, I must chase this, Venus and Gemini can also identify too strongly with whatever thoughts are uppermost in her mind. And these can just be the normal buzzing chatter that we all get in our mind all the time. But because they are so strong and frenzied and loud and noisy and tantalizing to Venus in Gemini, she can take these thoughts of the moment for the be-all and end-all, whereas if she sat still for a moment, she might go, oh, yeah, I kind of panicked and freaked out and ran away from that person, but actually on second thoughts, things are okay and they're not as bad as I am. There is that horrible fear of committing to the wrong person and then being tied down and then being stuck in a situation that limits the degree to which you can carry on exploring the rest of life. And so this placement can be tremendously excited by the idea of relationship, by the idea of love, by the idea of commitment, but to actually settle down and say, okay, just this one person for an indefinite period of time feels like it's cutting it off from the rest of the infinite possibilities out of the world. I can say, oh, look, there's a flower over there. I bend down, I smell the flower. Then the flower reaches out and grabs Venus and Gemini and says, now you are mine. And Venus and Gemini goes, no thanks, I've got a lot of flowers else I'd like to smell first before I decide I'm going to settle down with this one. And this is the thing about a lot of the air signs, is that relativity is very important. You know, are always going to compare one potential relationship with another, and so therefore may want to experience and stretch itself out among multiple people. That gives it this kind of broad study group that it can mine data from before it says, oh, okay, actually, out of all this lot that I've assessed, that one was the one that gave me most of what I wanted, and where I still felt free, and where I still felt like myself. So the only way I feel like long-term traditional relationships can really work for Venus in Gemini is for it to find someone who is as quixotic, curious, ever-changing, mutable, fluctuating, and just driven to find out more as life as they are. Someone who wakes up every day and says, okay, what's new? What's happening? What's going on in the world? Show me something I've never seen before, and do it quickly. And I think if they have someone who is able to keep that conversation going, and always changing in subtle ways, and always keeping their mind alive, if someone they are with gives them a sense of intellectual freedom, then that will be enough for them to make them think, here is a commitment that isn't making me be just one thing. Because Mercury is a shapeshifter, and Venus in Gemini is a shapeshifter. You know, she wants to, it's like she's looking out in life and she's in the costume department and she sees all the different costumes from all the different period dramas, from sci-fi epics to battles of the Trojan War, and she goes, okay, which one am I going to try today? Because she recognizes that within her are so many different possibilities, so many different archetypes, so many different masks and characters that she can wear, and her truth is to somehow be all of them according to where her moods and interests are currently aligning her. And she can wake up and she say, oh, today I feel like this, I will pick up this costume. Oh, tomorrow I feel a bit more Victorian, let's take up that corset. Oh, you know, actually I'm feeling a bit steampunky today. Her character is to have a long line of other characters that she could flip between and change into at any moment. And if she meets someone and says, who particularly likes her in the steampunk costume, and thinks that's who she is, that is the be-all and end-all of her personality, but then doesn't like her when she starts changing into a different costume every day, and this can be taken literally, but it's mostly a psychological metaphor as well for all the different states of being that Venus in Gemini is capable of inhabiting and taking on within herself. That person might say, who is this person? They seem false, they seem deceitful. 1 minute they're this, 1 minute they're that. 1 minute they have this opinion, the next minute they have that one. They don't seem to have any solid or clear outline like someone in Taurus does. It just seems to be zigzagging in all different directions. And you'd be right, you know, they're an air sign. They're not earthy. They don't have this solid, definite form that can be weighed and measured. You can't weigh the air. You can measure the different changes and speeds of the wind. You can look at the effect that it's having on the environment around it, calm and gentle, serene one moment, blustering and uprooting trees the next, but you can't tie it down. The wind is the wind. It is defined by its refusal to stop moving, and by the fact that it is seemingly everywhere and nowhere at once. And Venus in Gemini needs to have that capacity to be everywhere and nowhere at once, to be a person who is defined by their fluctuations, not by their sameness and stability. But this also defines the type of person that they are attracted to as well. And definitely mutable signs in general can have a contempt for familiarity. And this isn't true of, say, the signs on either side of Taurus and Cancer. Venus in both of those places wants a partner who is seemingly changeless, who they know is going to get up and be the same old person with the same likes and dislikes every day. Because Cancer, for instance, is so sensitive and moody and prone to flux itself, it longs to have a partner who can be a container for that sensitivity by seemingly being unchanging, by being this pond shape in the earth into which she can pour herself. Whereas if that earth is always shaking up and changing, that makes her feel turbulent and nervous too. And as I've already mentioned extensively, Taurus doesn't like those shake-ups either, whereas Venus in Gemini kind of needs a partner who's always surprising them, who they can never feel that they know fully, who they can never feel that they've mastered, that, you know, no matter whether they spend a day or the rest of their life with that person, they need to feel that every day that person has something new to offer, that is able to rearrange the facts to create some kind of new form. So yeah, if they dated a Taurus or Cancer and just saw this person who was plodding along doing the same thing every day that they've been doing since they're a teenager, there's a part of them that's going to think, what's wrong with this person? Why aren't they changing? Why aren't they moving? Why aren't they developing? Why aren't they hungry to go out into the world and find out what else is there? Why are they so stagnant and routine? But if they meet someone else who is also polymorphic and capable of changing all to these different forms, that it's like, I don't have to be earthbound with this person. Together we can launch into the air and keep changing into different species of birds. One day we'll be a sparrow chattering along in the hedgerow, then we'll be a mighty albatross, and then we can be a phoenix dying and regenerating itself. There is no limits to the intellectual fantasization that can occur when we are together. But because this is not always an easy thing to find when relationships by their very nature have a certain enclosed structure to them, again, unless we're talking about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, relationships that do allow for more of that openness and fluidity are friendships. You can have friendships with many different people in many different places who are part of many different friendship groups and who have all sorts of different interests and opinions and socio-political ideas. And most of the time, if you have friendships that are based on shared intellectual interests and passions, there isn't that emotional dependence that ties you to those particular friends. You know, you can travel up to London and see someone and spend a few days with them, and then pop over to Bristol or to Birmingham or you know, anywhere else, and none of those friends are going to be nagging you and harrying you and making you feel guilty that you're not spending each and every day with them like you might if you were in a relationship. You know, you can have multiple intellectual platonic partners at once. And I feel air signs often do have a greater capacity and a greater need to be fulfilled by intellectual companionship, more so than physical companionship, because even sex, I feel a lot of the time, for Venus or Mars in Gemini is more based on the curiosity and the suddenness and the spontaneity of the experience rather than the actual quality of the experience itself. It's the fact that I went out randomly and met a new person and I had a sudden frisson, dived into bed with them and might never see them again. That's enough. That's enough. And because you're being turned on by the freshness of experience rather than that person for now and forevermore, it kind of makes who the actual person is on the receiving end of that experience less important, because you're being driven by curiosity rather than a desire to find someone who will perfectly interlock with you and stay with you forever. And therefore you can be attracted to a huge diversity of very different types of people without any static physical requirements. You know, so long as it's different, so long as that person is in some way subtly different from someone you've been with before, it still excited you, it still opened you up to a different way that the mind of the universe, that the mind of God can express and experiment with himself. You know, God didn't just make the world and make the Garden of Eden and say, well, this is perfect, that's enough. You know, the universe keeps expanding, which shows that God too gets bored, you know. God doesn't just make a planet and say, okay, I'm just going to hover over this forevermore. He goes, no, I am infinite, and therefore I will keep exploring infinity. And Gemini really gets that. Anyway, that's enough for now. I hope you enjoyed this video and the exploration of this mercurial Venusian placement. If you want to chat to me about astrology and anything you need counsel or advice about, my contact details are below. If you fancy supporting me on Patreon, please do. And yeah, we shall talk soon.